So we've been doing this thing, and we'll have one more next week, these 4 words that I know from experience on my own side of things, but also from the Bible, we see how they can change our lives in so many ways. And so if you want to go back and listen to the last 2, you can go back and watch and listen to those. But this week's is a little bit more intense. I'm not going to be doing as much story because I want to kind of talk through some of it, and I want us to understand it a little bit more because I think I want to let the Word of God speak through this. And so I don't want to get into a whole lot of stories of this. The stories that I want us just to kind of dig into the Word. And as I was processing what I wanted to, this word, all these words I was working on months ago, just kind of processing them, and this one kept coming up, and I kept thinking about it, and as I was thinking about it and wrestling with it, I came across a message from a very well-known pastor, and he's speaking before a Christmas message, and he opens his Bible, and he opens up to Hebrews chapter 12, and it says this. He read it this way: "Pursue peace with everyone and holiness." Right off, the writer, as he's writing to Christians like you and I, he says that our goal is to pursue peace with not just the people we like, not just the people that we get along with, but pursue peace with everyone, whether they're church people or not church people, right? And holiness. Pursue holiness because there's a reason for it. Without those things, no one will see the Lord. No one will see what the gospel looks like. You will push people away from the gospel, and literally you'll be pushing them to hell. Verse 15 says this: "Make sure that no one falls short of the grace of God." We talked about the grace of God last week, right? Make sure that no one that you have a relationship with falls short of understanding God's forgiveness, His unmerited gift, His salvation, and the divine power He's given Him to overcome temptation. But this is the part that struck me. "And that no root of bitterness springs up." We're going to dig into that a little bit. That you root this idea of bitterness out before it springs up, because when it does, it causes trouble and defiles many. That word defile means to stain another color, to pollute, to corrupt. What the writer's saying is that when there's things in our lives that we don't root out, it ends up spreading to all the people around us. It spreads to our spouses and to our kids. It spreads to our relationships, our friendships. And so it got me thinking, well, he's kind of talking about this root. Well, what is a root? Well, it's something that's going on underneath the surface, right? Roots are underneath the surface. You don't see the roots. You don't necessarily see them. You see them when they sprout up something, a weed, a tree, a plant, whatever. But the roots are under the surface. Well, how did those roots get there? Well, it was planted. It was a seed. Something or someone planted that seed there. And so we want to remove these things. We want to be able to pay attention to what those things are, and we want to be able to understand them. And here's the thing. As I was thinking about this, it's obvious. We've all seen these kind of things happen. It's so easy to see these things in other people. But I want us to take this morning to really think about, could this be happening in me? Could there be something under the surface that I didn't even realize? That was grabbing me, that was changing me, that was making me ungospel-centered and more me, or maybe even just mean. We're going to kind of touch a nerve, and we're going to talk about bitterness. We talked about these 4 words, right? We talked about wait and pause. And with each of those, there's a negative. With wait, there is just learning to be patient and learning to trust and all that kind of stuff. And with pause, there's temptation. We're going to look at the idea of bitterness deeper today. Because the writer in Hebrews says we need to root that out because it's going to mess everything up if you don't. And we want to figure out how we can root out bitterness in our lives. And we have seen it happen so much. The problem is I don't think we realize how destructive things like this can be. And I'm going to say this, and it feels kind of extreme. But when this kind of thing surfaces, it nudges people to hell, not the gospel. We start nudging people. It's the reason why people don't want to have anything to do with church and with God, because they see the people that are supposed to love God not really be very loving sometimes. It springs up in our relationships, and it pushes our kids away from the gospel, and pretty soon as they grow up, they decide church isn't for them. And what we've done is we've nudged and we've pushed people away from the gospel and to something else. And that something else is always pointed towards hell. A lack of a relationship with God. And we see this, it is so easy to see it. Just think about the areas we see bitterness creep up. Politics. Are you red? Are you blue? Are you green? I don't know. But look at how our politics are so inundated with bitterness towards each other that they can't even have a conversation and come and meet eye to eye on something. Look at how lifestyle, a choice in lifestyle can create bitterness in us. It can push us away. It can push other people away. That if we just call ourselves a Christian, all of a sudden there's bitterness that is built up in somebody else that they don't even want anything to do with us. Think about, as silly as this is, difference in generations. This generation thinks that one's lazy. This generation thinks that one doesn't know what they're talking about. This generation thinks they're too young. This one thinks they're too old. It's all this stuff, right? And it's all just generational, but we get caught in all those weeds. And here's the problem. Some of these things we can't control. We can't control what politics do. We can't control what lifestyle somebody chooses. We can't even really control what generation you were born in. But there are two areas, two types of soil that we are called and that we are given divine power to control. And it's in our church and it's in our families. And if we step back and we think about it for a minute, we could probably very quickly see the areas in our own personal lives where bitterness may have crept in somebody else or maybe in us that has caused a wedge in a relationship that is supposed to be family. And so I started thinking about this question, well, how does bitterness creep into our lives? How does that start? It always begins with some kind of offense. Basically, I am hurt. I feel this hurt. Now, I'm not going to distinguish between, there's really kind of two kinds of hurt. There's real hurt that is done somebody to you that you can feel, but there's also perceived hurt. Perceived hurt is just, I start making some assumptions about the intent of what you said or what you did. It doesn't matter which one it is. If an offense is built in, there's something that begins to happen if we don't take care of it, if we don't resolve that offense as soon as possible. See, in our culture, everyone seems to be offended by something, right? It is so normal. Just look on social media and somebody's offended by something all the time. Think about the friends and the people we talk to. They're always offended by this person said this and that person did that. It is so common. And I was talking to Adam about this week, and he kind of made a comment. He said that offense is kind of like the currency of virtue. The currency of virtue that we want to appear virtuous, and so it is just so normal that everyone has an offense that we probably should be offended by something, and so we get offended by something. And that virtuous, that need to be virtuous, to be like everybody or better than everybody or better than whatever, that offense begins to take part, and we become a victim. We start to become a victim of something. And so what we do is we try to get people to recognize our pain. And we start wrestling with, well, I need to get some kind of response in a certain way. And if I don't get this response, it only feeds it more. And what happens is that offense just builds and builds and grows. And all we're doing by processing that offense is we're just fertilizing bitterness. We're just fertilizing it. There's a really good book by John Bevere. Jason told me about it too, and I had kind of seen bits and pieces of it, but I'd never read it. And so I sat down and read it a couple of years back, and I was thinking about his book, and he makes a comment that basically offense is like a trap of Satan. It's how Satan kind of traps us. It's that almost the offense is Satan planting a seed in our hearts. Because if he can get that seed to begin to grow, it'll take root in the form of bitterness, and it will grow, and it will destroy everything around it. And what happens is when we're offended, we start to draw inaccurate conclusions and information, and what happens is our understanding becomes darkened. It becomes distorted and twisted, and pretty soon what we think happened turns into something that really didn't happen. But we are so convinced that it happened this way that we get stuck in it. And then what happens is we give in to pride, and we build up walls because we don't want to be hurt anymore. And that pride just turns into being a victim because we blame somebody else for what's going on in our hearts. We become a victim and we blame others to justify our bitterness, our outrage, whatever it is. It's the way I was raised. It was what my dad did. It was what my mom did. It was what my spouse did. It was what my kids are doing to me right now. They're driving me crazy. This is why I'm having this. And it just fuels and spreads like a root. So the question that we got to wrestle with, and I know this is kind of a long jump into this whole process, but I want us to kind of process and think about how this all stirs. The real question that we've got to answer is, how long am I going to allow people who I like or don't like, who are still living or not, who have any kind of relationship with me or not, how long am I going to allow those people to control me? Because what happens is when we let that offense build, it turns into bitterness, and that bitterness begins to control us and control our reactions and our actions. And those are the things that spring forth. We'll talk about this in a minute. Those are the things that spring out, and now people begin to see it. And what happens is when people begin to see that, they don't want anything to do with the gospel, because apparently the gospel really doesn't change anybody, because look how that person is acting or reacting or behaving. And so then they go, well, I don't want anything to do with church. And then they go, well, I don't want anything to do with God. And the end result is not heaven, it's hell. So this is a serious thing that we've got to figure out how to root out. If it's happening in our hearts, we need to figure out how to root it out. If it's happening in somebody else's heart, if we see it happening in our kids, we have to figure out how can we help? How can we come alongside somebody and encourage them? What do we do about it? And so I want you to turn to Ephesians chapter 4, because we're going to look at a passage in Ephesians 4. We're going to dig into it a little bit. And this verse, this passage is huge, because Paul, what he does so brilliantly is he looks at some of the things that we wrestle with. He's writing to a group of people, a church just like us, with people just like us, who are going through some stuff. They're in a culture that is inundated with riches, and you got to make money, and you got to have power, and you got to have influence, and all this kind of stuff. And there's all these other belief systems that are all around them. And here's this church, this little church that's just trying to figure out how to love Jesus, and yet they're all walking in with all of this baggage of their past outside of church. And some things are starting to creep inside of the church and hurt it. And what he understands is that this idea of bitterness will wreak havoc in your relationships, and it will destroy a church. And the enemy would love nothing better than a church to be divided. The enemy will love nothing better than your family to be divided. And he knows how powerful bitterness and being offended can take us to that place. So he begins, and Paul, when he writes, he's not writing in a chapter, he wrote a letter. But we've broken it up into chapters so that we can understand. So when we get to Ephesians 4, it's kind of like Paul is continuing a thought, but he's starting kind of a new thought, and he begins to focus on a very simple process that he's thinking about a person who's a growing follower of Jesus, what they look like. He's thinking about what a healthy church looks like. He's thinking about what a healthy Christian and what a healthy family looks like. And so he starts to dig in. We've heard the phrase in Ephesians 6, children obey your parents, and parents love your kids and don't push them to anger. We've heard those phrases. Well, he's kind of going through this whole process. He's beginning to shift from who Jesus is to what the goal of being a church and being a family is, and it's one word, it's unity. He says it in at the very beginning of Ephesians 4. He says in verse 1, beginning of verse 1, he says, I am a prisoner of the Lord. I urge you to walk worthy of the calling you have received. So he's talking to Christians. And he says, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. The writer of Hebrews says, we're to pursue peace with everyone. Paul says, everyone, especially your family and your church. And as he continues to talk, he wrote to a group of Corinthian believers. And he talked about everyone being part of the body of Christ. He narrows it down and he talks a little less about it, but he does the same thing. He says every one of us, if we come to Christ, we become part of this body. And so there are some parts of the body that are stronger than others, but every part of the body needs to understand how they function. And if they don't, if there's something that part of the body is doing that is ruining the thing that everyone sees, if I'm a part of the body that is making the body of Christ look awful and mean, then there's some things that need to be rooted out. There's some things that need to be taken out of my life that I need to remove from my life. And that's where we get down to Ephesians chapter 4. And we're going to look at verse 31. And as he leans into this verse, he says something that caught my attention. He says, and don't grieve the Spirit. Don't cause the Spirit to have the feeling as if the body is dying, as somebody that it cares about is dying. Don't grieve the Holy Spirit. These things need to be removed. He talks to the Colossian church. He says, these things, it's like dirty clothes. These are the dirty clothes you need to take off, and these are the clean ones you need to put on. He does the same thing in these two verses. Watch what he does. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31. Follow with me. We're going to dig into this a little bit now. Let all bitterness, anger, wrath. Sorry, I lost my place a second. Let all bitterness, anger, wrath, shouting, and slander be removed from you, along with all malice. What he does is, the way that this is phrased, the way this is worded, especially in the Greek, it's almost as if he's giving us a progression. He doesn't talk about offensiveness or being offended. He begins with bitterness. I want you to picture bitterness as that seed. The offense is probably the seed, but now it's starting to grow and it's been watered and it's starting to grow and it's turning into bitterness. And he says bitterness is the first thing that we need to be conscious of. Bitterness is, remember, offense is I feel hurt. Bitterness is I can't forgive them. It goes from I feel hurt by this person that I can't forgive that person. The imagery that he is using when he uses this word bitterness is the image of a root of a plant that only produces bitter fruit. And so what he's going to do next, as he talks about after bitterness, he's going to reveal the things, the fruit that comes from this bitter root. See, what he's doing is he's beginning with what's happening internally with us. That there's something internal that is not God-centered, it's other-centered. And if it grows, it's going to spread. So if we don't root out that bitterness, it's going to progress into more observable reactions. Bitterness happens inside. That's why I want to take some time just to focus on it, because we may not even realize that we are stuck in bitterness. We need to really think about it. Are there people in my life that I just can't forgive? Bitterness is set in. Bitterness is under the surface. And we can keep that inside, can't we? But the problem is, it happens with every plant, it happens with every weed. If you don't do something about it, it's going to grow and it's going to spring forth. It's not going to stay under the surface. It's going to bear fruit, but it's not going to be a fruit of the Spirit. It's going to be a fruit of the enemy. It's going to be a fruit of hell, not of God. He says, he starts with let all bitterness, then he goes on to anger. Bitterness is that I'm not going to forgive them. I can't forgive them. Anger says, I'm not getting what I want. The word that he uses here for anger is actually an explosive out where everybody sees this reaction, where it's visible. It might be as subtle as you turn red and walk away. I would encourage you, if you get angry, walk away. I think that's a good thing. Don't just blow. But it even goes to the other extreme of it's obvious that you're angry. It's I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting what I deserve. You don't realize, boss, how much time I've put in. I'm not getting what I'm entitled to. When anger comes out from our kids, that's what they're saying. It's not they're not getting what they need. They're saying, I'm not getting what I want. And so with your child, you're trying to teach them not to have these outbursts. What's going on under the surface is bitterness is starting to grow about something. This is an unrighteous anger. It's one of the fruits of bitterness. It's this thing that kind of takes root and takes control of how you respond to somebody or how you think about somebody or what you talk about to somebody. And it all begins with somehow this person has offended you and you've let that bitterness grow to the point where now it's coming out in your actions. He goes on with the next word, the word wrath. So bitterness is the root, anger is one of the fruits, wrath is another fruit. Wrath says they need to pay for what they've done. I will tell you, this is probably one of the weakest parts of my life because being the oldest, I always believed that my brothers got away with everything. And it drove me crazy. Little did I know that my parents were behind the scenes punishing them or taking care of whatever they needed to do discipline-wise for them. It wasn't about me, but you know what I was always thinking? It is about me. I'm not getting what I want. They're not paying the price that I want them to pay. Bitterness that becomes anger, and then it boils up again and again, turns into wrath. It turns into trying to hurt somebody emotionally, mentally, physically, even socially, so that they learn, so that they see how much they've hurt you. It's not gospel-centered, it's me-centered. He goes on, he says, let all bitterness, anger, and wrath, and then he says shouting. Some of your versions might use the word clamor. I kind of like that word a little bit better because it's just not a normal word that we use. But this whole idea of clamor is this, that it's this crying out loud for everyone to hear, this how I have been so hurt, and I'm making sure everyone sees it. Creating a scene that you're such a hurt victim of whatever you're going through. The picture I get in my head, the imagery, is you remember in 2016, and this picture went all over the internet. I thought I was throwing it up on the screen, and I thought, no, I'm not going to give it that much credit. But you'll all know what I'm talking about. Back in 2016, Hillary Clinton's lost the election, President Trump has won, and there's this woman on the ground at this protest with a green jacket and a brown beanie. I still picture her, and she's just screaming. But it's a still image. That's the image that Paul is talking about. Like, I'm not getting what I want. You're going to pay. I can't believe this is happening. Just watch anything on TV and you see people, when they are at a conflict, they just jump to shouting over each other. That's the idea, that it's just a noise. It's just ridiculous. Then he gets into some more personal ones. Look at what he says next. Let all bitterness, anger, wrath, shouting, and slander be removed. We'll talk about that phrase in a second, be removed. But then he talks about slander. Here's what slander is. It's the Greek word blasphemia. It means a smearing of someone's reputation to other people. It's an attempt to turn people against other people by making observations about someone's character, about who they are, about why they do what they do. It's tearing down a person to make you look better than them or more deserving than they are. It's those back screen door conversations that we have with people that we don't think anyone else is hearing, but we are so hurt by somebody that we're going to talk about them behind their back like we're in somebody's backyard just talking through the back screen door, and we think nobody can know. But here's what happens is everybody knows. Everyone feels it. Everyone senses it. If you've ever been around somebody who has that root of bitterness, you don't have to be around them long before you get, oh man. But that turns into talking about people, tearing people down. And the last one is probably the most egregious. It's malice. I think that's why Paul separates it in how he writes this out. I think he makes this one like this is the worst of the worst. If there's levels, this is the worst. Malice is a desire to injure someone physically, socially, emotionally, and you don't care what the Bible says anymore. You don't even care what the law says. Listen, if somebody did something that hurt my child, there's a very strong possibility that I'm going to want to do something to hurt them back. And there's a part of me that says, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? But that person needs Jesus too. Jesus has forgiven them too. So how do I respond? And we'll talk about this a second here in a minute, but this is where it gets to the point where I am going to intend to hurt somebody. And we have seen this in our news so much lately. That somebody is hurt by some decision that some government entity has made, and so what they do is they go and try to harm somebody, shoot somebody, maim somebody, run over somebody that represents that thing. That's malice. You see, what happens is the growth of bitterness just begins, it's under the surface, but it begins to sprout like a weed. And if we don't root it out, it's going to spread to the people around us. It's going to spread to our family. It's going to spread to our friends. It's going to spread to our church. It's going to spread to the people that we care about the most. I think one of the greatest enemies of the tool, or one of the greatest tools of the enemy is bitterness. And so what Paul does here is he says to put it away, to cause it to cease, to remove it, to take it off and replace it with something else. That's where he gets to in verse 32. Paul is saying, hey, these things you need to be removed. They need to be removed. They need to be rooted out from under the surface. And even if you start springing, you see them springing, you need to address it. You need to take care of it. And you need to replace it with these things. And he does this so well. Paul, he's done this progression of bitterness, and it kind of grows from the outside to out, from the inside to the outside. He does the exact same thing in the next verse where he starts, so if that's how those things grow from inside out, let's start doing some things from the outside to fix us on the inside. And he works it almost backwards. Look at what he does. Look at verse 32. Just a note before I jump into this part. In verse 20, Paul said something very interesting. He says there's certain things that you've learned from Christ and certain things that you have not learned from Christ. The things in 31 are things that you have not learned from Christ. You've not learned from these things from Jesus and his life. Of all the people that should be able to have bitterness, anger, malice, all those things, the only one justified to ever be able to use those kind of reactions is Jesus. And what did he do? He did something different. These are the things we learn from Jesus. Look at verse 32. My version says and be, but most of yours might say but instead, be kind. Be kind. It's the Greek word Christos. It's the opposite of being harsh. It means to be pleasant. This is something that you do outwardly, that you do physically, that you're warm-hearted, not wretched. That your behaviors are warm-hearted, not wretched. My wife isn't here, so I can pick on her a minute. I don't know anybody that I've ever been around who has exhibited this to me better. Because there's times when people have said things and done things that have really hurt her. And I don't get it. It's only got to be because of Jesus that she is able to still show kindness. And sometimes she says, Matt, that's not too kind. And there's plenty of times when she's had that conversation with me. See, here's what Paul understands, is that it's really hard for you to remain bitter to somebody if you're making an effort to be kind to them. But he also knows the other part. It takes somebody a lot of work to stay bitter to somebody who's being really kind to them. And so maybe there's an offense that's been built up in somebody else that you know, and you don't realize you've done that. But there's been bitterness building up inside him, and you're like, what's going on? Why is this person this way? And he knows that if we just practice kindness, it's going to be really hard for them to stay bitter. It's going to root it out. He says, be kind. Look at the next word. He says to be compassionate to one another. The word for compassion here is really weird. It means to have strong bowels. That's weird. But what he's talking about is there's this kindness that you're doing, and then what happens is something begins to strengthen inside of you. Your soul, your spirit becomes strengthened, and you begin having a compassionate heart. You become tender-hearted instead of calloused. You realize that this person that may have offended you is probably hurting as well, and that they need to experience the grace of God because Jesus died for them too. And then he uses this word, and this is our big word today, forgive. Forgiving one another. That word forgive means to give freely. It's an attempt to preserve someone. This is crazy. When you look at the word, it means to preserve someone who is in peril. Forgiveness for that person is an attempt to save them from the hell that they're dealing with in their bitterness or how they've treated me, and is saving me. I'm in peril of going down a road I shouldn't go. It's a realization that that person who has hurt me, whether it's real or whether it's perceived, it doesn't matter, that they are in danger in their relationship with Jesus. And I need to do what Jesus did and forgive them, even if they don't ask. Why can I say that? Back to verse 20. Because this is what Jesus did for you. You didn't even know you needed salvation. You didn't even know you needed forgiveness, and he died for you. That's the example we have. He says we can forgive because he forgave us. Remember, John talks about this as well. He says that we love because he first loved us, right? Well, just process this a second. He also says, not just love because he first loved us, but he also says, if you say you have love, but you hate your brother, you have bitterness towards your brother, Christ's love is not in you, it's something else. Doesn't mean you're not saved, it just means that there's something else that has taken root in your heart. Why should I forgive them? If they don't apologize? Because Jesus forgave you. Because Jesus forgave you first, before you need it. And think about this. The reason why you ask God for forgiveness is because his forgiveness of you allowed your heart to be opened up enough to realize that you needed to be forgiven. And maybe that's all it's going to take in this relationship, is just to begin with forgiveness. So I want to be careful. But I want to kind of shift a little bit. That the word that can change our lives is the word forgive. I want us to kind of process that. It doesn't mean that we just throw ourselves and we just ignore whatever happened. It's not that we just kind of put ourselves back in a difficult or bad situation where somebody can take advantage of us or abuse us. I'm not saying any of that. But it's all about recognizing God's grace and how God's grace has been shown to me and how I can try to show it to somebody else. A guy by the name of Victor Max said this: forgiveness is giving up your right to hurt someone back for hurting you. I like that. I think that's a good definition. I've got a little different definition. I would say this, that forgiveness is you don't owe me what I feel or what I think or what I believe you owe me. You don't owe me what I think you owe me. I'm going to forgive you. Am I going to put myself back into a situation where you're going to take advantage of me or you're going to mentally, physically, emotionally abuse me? No, I don't have to do that. But I can forgive you. I can let go of you controlling my life and controlling my reactions to things. I'm not going to let bitterness take root. I'm going to root that out so that there's no fruit that is going to push people away from the gospel, including you. If in your mind that person is guilty, the greatest weapon that you have for your health, spiritually, emotionally, all that, for your soul, is forgiving them. Because Jesus forgave us first. We've all heard the phrase, hurt people, right? But Jesus, Paul, they flipped that phrase a little bit. Because of what Jesus has done for you, because of who you are, because you're a follower of Christ, hurt people who follow Jesus, forgive people. That's our job. It's hard. It's not easy. But because he first forgave us, we are able to forgive. He gives us that divine power to do that. And our enemy is going to do everything he can to plant those small seeds in our lives of offense. How dare she not like my post? She always likes my post, and now she didn't like it, and so something's going on. I can't believe it. I sent this person a text message, and I saw those 3 little bubbles pop up, and then they went away, and they never responded. That happens, right? It creeps in subtly. I walked in, and he didn't even say hi to me. I sat down here by myself, and she didn't even come over and say hi. It creeps in. It's slow. It's subtle. Why do I have to do it that way? Why does my boss, why does he think he's always right? Why does my employee never seem to listen? Why does my child never take out the trash? Why does my husband never buy me flowers? Why does my wife, no, let's not do that. Our wives are perfect. Yeah, we got to hold on to that one. See how subtle it is? It just starts with this little offense, and it grows, and it grows, and Satan knows it, and he loves it because he wants nothing more than your family to fall apart and the church to fall apart. So, let me end with something. I want to give you some things to think about when it comes to how to forgive someone. And it's not a, hey, do this, this, and this, and then you'll know how to forgive. It's really more of you've got something going on internally, bitterness that has rooted. You need to figure out how to fix that internally. And so a lot of it is just asking yourself some questions or having some specific thoughts. And so these might be kind of things you need to write down, take a picture of, whatever will help you. But here's how to forgive someone. First of all, understand you can't control what someone does, but you can control how you respond. You can. How do I know that you can do that? Because of the divine power that we talked about that Jesus has given you and brought to you because of his grace. You have the power to change the way you respond. Your response should be fruits of the Spirit or fruit of hell. That's the only 2 options that your response has. That's it. And if it's not the Spirit, it's something else, and that's not good, and you need to root it out. We can control how we respond. Second, don't let an offense replace the potential of the gospel. I had some of these moments. There was a time when my girls were playing softball. We had some friends of our family that we had done a lot of things in school together, and just they weren't necessarily people that went to church a whole lot. They had a different church that they kind of went to once or twice a year. But we were trying to build this relationship, and so we did some softball stuff together, and our girls were on the same team at one point. And I remember we left a tournament. It was the last tournament of the season. We ended up losing in extra innings. And I'm driving off and get about an hour down the road, and I start getting a phone call and text messages from people. Can you believe so-and-so started blaming your daughter for losing the game? And in my head, I'm going, where did this come from? She scored the game-tying run by avoiding a tag. If she wanted to throw the game, she would have just taken the tag, but she jumped over that to score the game-tying run. And then I started thinking about all the things that they had done and all the things that had put her in a position and put the team in a position to lose. And I started building this offense inside, and I remember stopping, and I remember Lori even saying, we need to figure out how to be kind. I had a group of guys I played basketball with, and I didn't realize where my arrogance had gotten me. I knew I wasn't as good as I used to be, but in my head I said, I can handle anything. A guy from our church started playing with us. There's a bunch of guys that didn't have any relationship with Jesus, didn't go to church anywhere, that I've been playing with. And he comes to play, and he's 6'6", taller than me, bigger than me, better than me. But I know how to get in somebody's head. And so I would do all these little things to try to get in his head, and none of them worked. I pretty soon ended up resulting, I ended up fouling him as hard as I could all the time. And he never responded. After a couple months, job changed, and he couldn't play anymore. And I was thinking back about this message, and I thought back about that, and I said, and I realized that the fruit that I had shown those guys was not the fruit of the Spirit for this man. There's something else. And I regret to this day that I didn't show them the gospel the way I should have. Because I let this bitterness is all about me and how good I am and how great I am that had just set in. And I wasn't responding the way that God wanted me to. Third, don't keep a record of wrongs. 1 Corinthians 13, what does it say? It says, in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love keeps no record of wrongs. If you love your brother, if you say you have love but you hate your brother, his love is not in you. Love keeps no record of wrongs. If you say you have love and you hate your brother or sister, you don't have love. It's not in you. There's something else growing inside. Last one. Remind yourself, and probably the most important one, remind yourself of what Jesus has forgiven you for. It goes back to what we've talked the last 2 weeks. When those offenses step in, pause. There's temptation on the other side of that. The temptation to become bitter. That seed has been planted. Pause. Start thinking about how you can put your weight, your trust on the Lord to help you through that offense, to find a way to forgive. Pause. Give the Spirit time to move. And in that pause, start thinking about all the things that Jesus has forgiven you for. I bet as you kind of make a mental list, if you want to make a paper list, you can, but then probably throw it away so no one sees it. But as you make a list of all those things that Jesus has forgiven you, I bet that those things, my bet is that almost every single one of them is way worse than whatever that person is doing to you. And if that person has done something so egregious that it outweighs all of those things, he or she still needs the forgiveness of Jesus. And he or she is still the reason that Jesus died on the cross. He died for them too, in that sin. So pause. See, forgiveness is possible because Christ forgave you. And so when those offenses come, pause. Determine that you are going to wait on the Lord to change them, to convict them, or to work in your heart and forgive them before you let it take root. I'm going to end with this quote, and it's not on the screen or anything. I came across it actually Friday, I think. As I was kind of thinking through things, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw this quote, and I thought, man, that's so good. So I tweaked it a little bit to fit our context, and basically the quote is this: imagine our community where people who are skeptical of what we believe were envious of how we treated each other. Imagine the people that know your family. They know you go to church. They know you claim to be a Christian. But they see you, and they are envious of how your family treats each other. Imagine the people that would never step foot inside of a church because of how they've seen church people, and then they see the people at First Street Church, and there's just, and I've heard this time and time again, so I'm not saying that we don't do this well, but maybe there's some areas in our lives where we could do this better. There's people who come to this church because they have seen how we treat each other. But if bitterness is inside of any of us, it will grow. And it will push people away from the gospel.